Alright. Hello, so this is step 2 of Samuel Beckett. It's Anya Divine here. And I just stopped the step 1 video because there was someone at the door, and it's actually watercolour paper I ordered for my next workshop. I'm teaching a painting workshop, watercolour portraiture painting workshop in Edinburgh, or just outside Edinburgh, Kilkenzie, in February. And so I'm delighted now that that's arrived, that paper. This paper I've been using recently isn't the stuff that I normally use, although it's doing the job just fine for these sketches and things, And the Bockingford paper is what I would normally use, and I love it because it's possible to really lift off, to excavate and lift out the light, to retrieve the light, in order to carve in the particular shape of the face if it needs changed as the painting progresses, if I realise I've put dark where I want there to be light. So as a lot of folk will say that watercolour is set in stone. Once you've placed it, but I find that it is possible to move things. Yeah, I find it is possible to move things. Now this is and that reminds me of a quote that's one of my favourite quotes by Cézanne, apparently. I say this really with great confidence. I say, it was Cézanne who said that or whatever. And sure, very often I'm all wrong. Or maybe not all wrong, but it might have been attributed to 4 or 5 different folk. But anyway, the quote is, "My painting holds hands and comes up together." And to me it feels like that's a very inclusive. It kind of feels like the energy is kept alive all over the painting. All of it is in the mix. All of it is given an energy. But hasn't he got a stunning bone structure and penetrating gaze? I just feel very kind of sound in the presence of this man's photo here. There's real steady, sure clarity to the outlook somehow. And I'm guessing that might come across in his words too. I could do with looking at some more of his writing. Yeah, and so his head needs to extend a little bit further out to the left there, I think. So it's the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna I'm using again here. I suppose in a way it was no harm that the bell went there, because I might post this one onto Instagram if I think of it. And Instagram, you can only have videos that are 15 minutes long and no longer than that. So it's kind of good for me to knock it on its head a little bit and not linger for an hour. I might still do that, but at least the first part was, I'd say, under the 15 minutes, I imagine. Alright. I found these brushes I tend to use a bit more for lifting off, so I want to bring the ear down a little bit lower there. I feel like it could do being marginally lower, so I'm just using the wet, slightly more damp than wet, I suppose, brush to lift off the bottom of the earlobe and make it sink lower down there. That lady will need to have a WALK as well, so that'll be another reason to not make this an epic performance, because we'll have a wander in the woods, myself and Maisie. My friends have been posting lots of lovely kind of forgiving yourself poetry, and last night one of the things I need to forgive myself for really is staying up until 3 o'clock last night. The last thing I listened to was a podcast with I think it was Sounds True Sounds True podcast with Tanny something, and she was interviewing Anne Lamott, and she is absolutely brilliant for that whole thing of allowing yourself not to be perfect, and kind of, as we all end up doing in life, parenting ourselves at some point, kind of reparenting, that that's something that she's very keen on, is the thing of revisiting the parts of ourselves that might have been unacknowledged or lost a little bit as a child, no matter the brilliance of our upbringings, that there's always something, isn't there, that maybe needs addressed now just by its nature, by the nature of being human. Anyway, so I've recently been coming across a lot of helpful things like that, and my friends just posted a lovely piece from Facebook, actually, that I read about that whole subject of it's okay, you're not getting life wrong if everything is feeling wrong today, it's just the way it happens sometimes. And so what I could have given myself a row over, and I've had a few little battles with it this morning, is the fact that I've wanted to get up early and do my yoga and meditation and get all of that done before the day really takes off. And I did do my yoga and meditation, but because I was in bed at 3 o'clock last night instead of 10, I didn't get up until maybe 10 o'clock, 11. And that's when I started the yoga meditation thing. So I still did do it. And, I don't want to be a slave of time. Fine if it serves me. And I do feel like there's freedom to be had in a bit of a structure, and that it allows for more freedom in life, actually, rather than less, when there is some kind of boundary around time. But having said that, some of my best paintings and some of my most inspiring moments of listening or living have been in the middle of the night, when I'm up on my own and there's nobody around, and I might be painting or listening to something, and there oftentimes that can be a lovely space to occupy too. So I'm just going to say never say never. Like my mum says, moderation in all things, and I'm occasionally maybe going to moderate my all-nighters. I won't be doing an all-nighter, and I haven't for a long time, but just now and then to know that it's a possibility, I guess, in the midst of the ritual and routine that we kind of impose in January on ourselves. So I think he's coming. I'm going to just lift off a bit more of those chiseled cheekbones with some of the Jackson's orange. I'm pretty sure that my hand is covering my painting a lot here, so I hope that it's still satisfying to see. Satisfying to that you can actually see enough. Yeah, there's a lovely bit of light falling on the upper surface of the lower lid there. let's go to that brooding dark eye over on that side there. I'm still working with the ultramarine blue and the Van Dyke brown. No, the burnt sienna actually. Ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. So we've got a depth of tone here in the center, and then it's wanted to be a bit more blue than brown though. This blue. I'll travel across here too. While I'm working on that, I might as well work on this one as well. I think it helps to bring the same dark all the way across, and even down the face too. Okay, so what about here now? It's kind of a sailing up and down. I think it helps me not to do like a continuous line anywhere, but to continue to trust that I'll find each little bit that'll make up the jigsaw of his face eventually. And where the light meets the dark could be considered like jigsaw pieces fitting together. So to really negotiate the shape of the edge where the dark socket of the eye here meets the lighter forehead above, and the dark of the iris where that meets the light that's falling on the upper surface of the lower lid down here on this side, and even the gouged out bone structure around the shadows under the eye here, maybe giving them a little bit more strength as well. And wherever there's that kind of strength added, it demands it elsewhere too. As I was listening to someone on YouTube yesterday, you can't get it wrong and you'll never get it done regarding life. So we might as well just give it a go. Step into it, the next available adventure. And it feels to me like I've got a way of stepping into adventure which isn't life or death, but feels like it in painting. So that's quite a satisfying thing. You don't have to go anywhere. So my next step today now is to take Maisie. No, I'll put scones in the oven first, and then I'll take Maisie out for a wander while they cook. Now scones don't take long to bake, so it'll be a quick walk first, and we'll go for a longer walk later on this evening, because Lily has her pals coming around to study with her at 1 o'clock, and I want first to have eaten my scones and taken Maisie for a walk, a short walk before they arrive. I want the space to have a read and cup of tea or coffee and my scones before the living room is invaded. And I also need to tidy up after last night, because I did a demonstration last night for an art group. It's a live demonstration that I give on Zoom. I love it. I love doing that, you know. And so if you're ever, I mean, I think I charged £200 for that one. It was 2 hours long, and there was up to 30 participants meant to be. But it's quite nice, you know, inviting folk into the living room and painting along to company. Even although most people did mute their microphones, I did still feel the attention and the witnessing, and it makes a difference. It makes me also set myself up a little bit more. I'm still sometimes racing to the finish line to get the Zoom meeting on the go. If I'm, like last night, I was priming the surface of the paper for the flower painting when the meeting was just about to start, because I decided to use a different piece of paper. But anyway, most of the time I managed, and I did yesterday manage to really set myself up so that everything was within easy reach, And when it's for something else, it has been helpful to me to get into the practice of and then on my own too, setting up for myself too, of getting things in order beforehand best I can, and then take that leap of faith, and understand that the element of chance will always enter in anyway, but just to have a bit of an easing into it, creating structure that allows again for freedom. So that thing of having all of my paints within easy reach, and the water and the brushes I needed, and the easel set up and the camera set up so that I could draw back regularly. I love to have a runway behind me generally when I'm standing at the easel, especially, so that I can advance and retreat, almost like fencing with the painting. So so if you fancy joining me in that whole escapade, no matter where you are in the world, of course, because Zoom can do that now, let me know. Keep me posted. And if you're new here, you mightn't know that I do a newsletter every couple of weeks as well. It can be any kind of thing in it, but generally it's a bit of chat about my life, I suppose, and there's a painting of the week, painting for sale, and there's a list of the workshops I'm teaching and things, and stuff to do with the dog and the cats and my children and myself, generally my stability or instability, the whole dance. So if you'd like to join me there, you're very welcome, and I'd love to continue our conversations there. And thank you to all of you who do join and who sometimes send a little message back after a newsletter. It's really lovely, because I sometimes, very often I feel like when I'm doing it that it doesn't really land, or if it does, that it might be an inconvenience, because I find that sometimes with emails in my inbox. So then it's lovely to get the affirmation, and it keeps me coming back and doing it when people say, oh, I like that poem you shared, or whatever it is, or I get it when I've had a particularly rough few weeks, or I'm thinking that I have, and it's really only a few hours but I've swelled it up in my mind to make it bigger. It's a funny thing that we can do as human beings, isn't it? To see not the 99% that's going swimmingly, but the 1% that could be better. And I think it's that's training in painting has trained me out of that way of working, because creative, or that way of thinking, to a degree, I mean, it's a work in progress, but it's trained me out of that of tuning into that critical voice. I still find that it happens, but generally I know that creativity does not flower in fear. And so, along with physically moving and just showing up, so within the creative act, to actually move regularly, that dissipates fear, and also just showing up, as I say, and not having a particular desired outcome in mind. Like today now is an example of a time when I could have been fierce concerned about this, because somebody got in touch to say, I'd love a Samuel Beckett painting like the one you did last week, and I feel a bit like, oh gosh, I could go into that whole thing of it better be the same as that one, or all of that rigid thinking. And instead, thankfully today I feel free, and I feel like this is a new piece of work, and each time it is, and who knows what's going to happen, and I wouldn't want to know beforehand. What's the joy in that, like? And I do feel there's a little bit of a collaboration here. Do you know what? I often find that sometimes I paint loved ones who have died for family members, and I feel the resonance with the person that I'm painting as I'm painting it. I feel like there's assistance, and it's a lovely thing, a real honour actually. From existing photos, I haven't looked at the screen for ages. I don't know if you've been able to see. Oh, that's annoying, isn't it? The microphone lead, sorry. Just realised I was sitting there. Right in front of the picture. Okay, so maybe a bit of yellow ochre here now. I'm subduing anything that's white that isn't white here. So that because of course light reveals form, and anywhere that's got a bump is going to be light, and anywhere that's a bit darker is going to be hollowed in. So light reveals form. And it's a really helpful thing to know that, and then that gives a purpose to finding the particular lights and darks that really matter here. And so what I find helpful is the dark under the eyebrows, the shadow beneath the nose. Just put a little bit more. There's some nuanced shadows that I've missed in the nose there. The shadow beneath the nose, the shadow of the upper lip is often a very helpful one, particularly here. Samuel Beckett's got this very beautiful, dark, chiseled shape to his upper lip, which is very particular to him, so it's a bit of a gift for a portrait painter. So that, yeah, the shadow of the upper lip, the dark of the upper lip, and then the shadow beneath the lower lip. There are some people you can paint forever, really. I would say everybody's face actually has got a continual juice, fodder for feasting on as a painter. But there are models in Edinburgh, you know, Lake and Helena and Alistair, Comanche. There's loads of models, Charmaine, who are very beautiful to paint for me again and again, and never lose their life for me, the excitement. And I suppose every face, as I say, could be like that, but there are particular, maybe it's because my memory of painting them sustained me through years that were difficult as well, you know, that was one of my solaces, going along to paint the models at art classes, and these are the models that would have been there. I mean, really, I'd say I've painted Alistair hundreds of times. You'll find a fair few of those videos of me painting Alistair on my YouTube channel, actually, and of Helena, maybe Lake as well, I'm not sure, Comanche. But it's a bit of a minefield, my YouTube channel, isn't it? I can't find videos myself, so I don't know how you're expected to maybe sort that out this year. Or, you know, it might sort itself out. I find these things iron themselves out somehow through some serendipity or grace-filled action, if you can let go of the rigid thinking around that. Let me see now. I think maybe the brush is a little bit small for what I'm wanting to do. So when I half close my eyes, there are dots to join up here. And the burnt sienna again feels like a good colour for me. So half closing my eyes, I recognise that actually there's a bit darker. It's a bit darker there and there. And here isn't quite so bright all the way over to the ear. I could possibly lift off even a little bit of that cheek coming in towards the nose. It could be a little bit lighter. Darker there though. It's darker there and darker there. And the ear isn't that bright. And that area is not quite that bright either. Bit of a shadow there. I'll change my colour a little bit. This is where the Bockingford paper would be a little bit more robust now, because it's thicker. The paper that I use for the workshops is thicker than this paper, so this is warping slightly, but it's not bothering me, for, you know, really. It's just a small thing. So the dark behind there, so I'll half close my eyes again, let's see. And actually even that could be darker generally. And join, so underneath the cheek, maybe not quite that, that's okay. And then here, this little patch that reaches down to the mouth, and there's a few things I'm kind of slightly missing there, I think. Just some little touches that make it Samuel. And the bottom, that shadow that's underneath the lower lip is always a good one to find. I think I want to put a bit more burnt sienna into that. My leg is curled up underneath me, and I'll have not goose pimples, pins and needles probably. A bit more blue, I think, in that shadow. It's ultramarine blue I like to use. So this dark here, making it deeper. In the background dark, I push in and lift to where the face stops and the background begins there, to create a depth of tone that's making obvious the fact that the face ends and the background starts there. And the eye has a more of a solid knowing look than the open innocence I had there, so I shifted that a touch. I can move down this, not that there isn't open innocence too, but there's something more solid in that eye that I wanted to capture. Okay. I feel like I'm almost done with this. It's one that there's a possibility I'll come back and do a few touches when it's completely dry, like lifting off some of the light that's on the upper surface of the lower lid there could be lifted off when the paint is a bit drier. When it's too wet, sometimes when you're wanting to create a crisp line, to lift out a crisp line, it can be quite tricky when it's wet, because it just bleeds in, and you might as well just wait until it's dry. And other times it does work to lift out, like just there. That did work for me. Now I'll half close my eyes again because I'm still looking to re-establish the darks, but more importantly to find the mid-lights, the lights that aren't completely bright, but aren't they're not completely bright as the top of the forehead is, but they're not dark either. There's some areas that are needing to be subdued a little bit. I'm wondering if my plan to make scones and walk Maisie before the girls come is a bit ambitious, but however, this is worth it. It feels like a satisfying excursion into the face of Samuel Beckett again. And these hooded eyes that are so full of maybe living and the wisdom accrued through that, I suppose. Yeah, and there's some mid-tones too happening in the wrinkles above the eyebrow. So it's not all dark lines and light in between. There's a mid-tone happening there that may again be more appropriate painted when it's dry. I could put a wash over some wrinkles so as not to lose them, but to deepen the tone a little bit between them and stop it being just white. So I've got some whipped cream in the fridge that I'm going to have with my scones, and I think I'll have a coffee. I've not had a coffee for a few days. You know, when there's a vulnerability and a kind of fragility, coffee isn't the thing that I'm warming to in those times. It's a cup of tea, whereas today I feel like I could manage a coffee. And scones with jam and cream, I think, need to be had with coffee. Although they call it a cream tea, don't they, in Cornwall and places. Clotted cream and a cup of tea. I wonder if I'm encouraging you now to go out and get yourself some scones and cream. I've got some damson jam. I've also got homemade blackcurrant jam that my neighbour gave me. My mum's blackberry jam is all but finished. There's a tiny bit left in one jar. The blackberry jam that she gave me about 4 pots of blackberry. We had gooseberry, raspberry, all different jams, and they were delicious. And especially, I think, knowing that the berries were picked from my mum's garden or from the ditches that she walks by the sea. The blackberries in the summer were growing when I left in August, and when I came back after teaching my workshop in Edinburgh, she was picking a couple of pounds of blackberries every day. So there was none when I left. They were just hard green things. And when I came back a few weeks later, the sun on the south coast there shines brightly on those blackberries, and that the hill down to the beach is covered in blackberry bushes. My mum was telling me that it's a fantastic find, that hill, and she was the first out to them every day. And sometimes the grandchildren would go with her, and they'd be eating them and picking them, eating as much as they were picking, I'd say. But when we were young, I remember the biggest, brightest, beautiful, shiny blackberries would always be at the top of the ditch. I say ditch. What I mean by ditch is like hedges at the side of the road. So they'd be like 10, 15 foot hedges outside our backyard, and the massive blackberries sitting there that you could not reach. Tantalizing. But there was a lot that you could reach, and the birds were able to get the higher ones, so that was no harm either. And so the blackberry jam tasted spectacular then. It's very different when it's made from blackberries that come from somewhere you know, and that's all part of the experience. Rightio. So how are we doing here, I wonder? I'd say I'm almost there with it. I haven't so much stood back. Like I haven't stood back at all, have I? But if I was to be painting this upright, I'd have been dancing back and forth a lot. And I'm skeptical that I haven't been doing that at all, or even really taking stock. But I think there's some sort of thing that enters in here that has me in a bit of a flow anyway. And in that place, it feels like things are revealed that need to be painted in, and what's not needing to be painted in won't be cottoned onto. So I'm trusting that's the case here. Something to do with your company and the might of this man that I'm painting, and the soothing kind of new mood that has descended on me that feels in tune with things again, in tune with life. We're never outside of life, are we? But just imagine this. Sometimes feel more separate from everything alive than you could imagine, and then suddenly it's all flooding back again, and it's all okay, and nothing really has changed. It's funny, isn't it? Well, it's not funny, but it's life, and like painting somebody like Samuel Beckett, I'm quite happy to explore life, looking at this face, who I would say he lived a good solid existence. I don't know much about his life at all, but I have a feeling that he didn't shy away from living, however that is. I'm sure none of us can. No matter what our situation, life will kind of bring itself to our doorstep, doesn't it? It kind of tussles us around the place, and I don't think any of us is without, as my friend says, into every life a little rain must fall. I guess none of us is without struggle of some sort. That sounded strange, didn't it, the grammar there? None of us is, none of us are. I don't know. Right, now, what's going to happen here? I feel like I maybe need to extend the size of the head a little bit, or it feels like it's coming in too much there now. So some outward gestures might work to prevent that hemming him in too much. And he's got this incredible blazing forehead, so I might as well make something of it. Let me soften down the dark there, I think, a little touch, and just extend it up and soften the colour a bit in that shadow between the eyebrows. You know, I felt him smiling at me for a minute there. Yeah, so I think I'll let him dry now for a while, and then I'll come back and see if there's anything to be excavated, any light to be lifted out. But for now, that's how he is. I don't want to lift it up too much because, you know, it's still very wet. Just before you go now, there's something about this needs to sweep up too. This kind of quiff at the middle. Just easing it out a bit around him. Yeah, so if there is any more to be done to this, I'll film it and show you. So don't worry if you're thinking you want to see the rest of it. If there is any more to be done, I'll record it and put it on YouTube as a step 3. I was using the dry paper towel to print off some areas that readers particularly like to me. Yeah, there's a bit back there that I just needed to lift off that little touch there, I reckon, just to widen that area a little bit. Oh, yeah, the pins and needles will, I think, take hold for sure. Where was I going with that? I was going to push that over. Yeah, do you know, I'll leave him alone now for a while, and I'll leave you alone. 42 minutes in, definitely be pushing the scones, I'd say, but I am going to have them. Okay, thanks very much for joining me. All the best. Bye.